Well, good morning. The Senate Committee on State Affairs will come to order. Will the clerk call the roll?
Betancourt, Birdwell, Lamantia, Menendez, Middleton, Parker, Perry, Schwartner, Zaffarini, Paxton, Hughes.
Good morning. We have an agenda we'll be moving through this morning, and as some will be familiar this time of session, members of the Senate are on multiple committees and have bills to present in even more committees, so members will be in and out, and we'll try to accommodate members to hear the bills and, of course, accommodate the witnesses. The chair lays out Senate Bill 950 and recognizes the bill's author, Senator Colcourse, to explain the measure. Good morning, Senator.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Thank you and your staff for their great accommodations. This is my second bill to lay out in State Affairs. I think this one will be shorter than the first, but I am very grateful for the work that y'all do here, the members, the late nights, and long evenings in this very important committee. Today I bring Senate Bill 950 before you. This bill actually came out of Senate District 18. Members, it is a bill that was brought to my attention actually by the Caldwell District Attorney, one of the attorneys in Burleson County Attorney, Susan Deskey, when they were sued, Mr. Chairman, by Fund Texas Choice after the passage of Senate Bill 8, one of your bills, the heartbeat bill. And they contacted our office. Of course, you know, some of these small rural counties have very small budgets, extremely small budgets, and they were having to defend the state law. So I contacted the Attorney General's office to see if they could represent Burleson County along with other counties that I represent. And today you'll hear from one of those, and our district attorney from Washington County. Very proud that she's here. I've known her for years. But in talking with the OAG's office, they were like, we don't think that the law would allow that. And so what Senate Bill 950 does is a permissive bill that it makes clear that the Attorney General has the authority to defend a district attorney or a county attorney in federal court if the cause of action relates to the enforcement of a state statute and the county attorney or district attorney request assistance in defense. It is permissive. You can imagine if it was if it was demanded, and that could certainly have a very large fiscal note. This will allow the Office of Attorney General to look at the cases and say, yes, we will, we're able to represent you or not. And so that's why you don't see a fiscal note on this currently. And I'm really pleased to have brought this before. And Mr. Chairman, I do have a committee substitute.
The chair lays out the committee substitute and recognizes the author to explain the substitute.
Thank you. The difference is that it's just a ledge council draft. We were really working on this and working with the Attorney General's office to be able to get a bill filed. So we filed the non-ledge council draft, and that's what you see before me. So I would say that, Mr. Chairman, this could be applicable to some of the state statutes that we pass here, and then you actually have almost what I call a class action suit that's filed against these small counties, and they don't have the resources or the personnel to defend all of some of our state laws that we pass. So that's the essence of Senate Bill 950.
Thank you, Senator Colcourse. Any questions for the author? Welcome, Senator Betancourt.
I just wanted to make sure that, and you probably covered it in your layout, it looks like
this isn't the election.
The election. I don't have a question.
Thank you. It's a great bill.
Very well. We'll open testimony and call invited witnesses. Honorable Julie Rankin. Please have a seat, and while you're getting ready, we'll also call Ed Johnson to testify right after the district attorney. Welcome. Introduce yourself and give us your testimony.
Yes, thank you for having me today. My name is Julie Rinkin. I'm the Washington County District Attorney, and I'm here to speak in support of this bill. First off, I'd like to thank Senator Kolkhorst for sponsoring this bill. As you can imagine, last fall, we've all found ourselves in quite a position. And sought help from the Attorney General's office, and they did not feel like they had the authorization to represent us, and I think this bill would fix that. Four of us come from rural counties, and we are currently having to use county funds to fund this lawsuit and defend ourselves against the enjoyment that they are seeking against us. And so I'm here to answer any questions. I think it's a great bill because it is discretionary, and I think it's always better when they're discretionary, but I am certainly here to answer any of your questions.
Thank you for your testimony. How long have you served as district attorney?
I am in my 11th year, and I was a county attorney for 12 years before that.
Outstanding. Thank you for doing that. Thank you. Senator Kolkhorst, any questions for the author? It sure makes sense to us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think she's saying we came into office at the same time. Is that right?
It's good to have you here. Thank you. The chair calls Shannon Edmonds. There he is. All right. Okay, we show you as wishing to testify. Does that mean you wish to testify? Very good. Thanks. Anyone else wishing to testify on, for, or against? Okay, the chair calls Alice Yee. Alice Yee. Alice Yee had indicated a desire to testify. Senate Bill 950 for the bill. Anyone else present wishing to testify on, for, or against Senate Bill 950? All right, seeing and hearing none, public testimony is closed, and the bill will be left pending at this time. The chair now lays out Senate Bill 260 and recognizes its author, Senator Kolkhorst, to explain the measure.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Another bill that came from Senate District 18 in meeting with some of my constituents. Senate Bill 260 requires voter registrars to send confirmation notices to voters who haven't voted in the preceding 25 months, which would be actually 2 election cycles. It would include the May uniform election. It would also include the constitutional election. The bill, I know Senator Betancourt was here for a second. I have to say the bill does not make any other changes to 15.051. The new underlined text simply takes current law and arranges it more clearly in a readable format. That part of the section was a bill that I joint authored with Senator Betancourt last session. Senate Bill 1111, catchy number there. Senate Bill 1111, that had to do with P.O. boxes. And so a little bit of background, Mr. Chairman. I met with some folks in Fort Bend County that had some concerns. We have a few counties that actually have more registered voters than eligible age voting citizens. Can I say that again? In other words, the registration rates of those counties exceed 100% of eligible voters. Now, it's really interesting. I kind of did a look across the nation. Now, we're not as bad as Michigan. Michigan needs to do some cleaning up there. I just want to warn them. But Texas has a number of those counties. Now, a lot of them are small counties, interestingly enough. So if Senator West were to ask me, is this a Harris County bill? I would say to him, no, it is not. It is a Fort Bend County bill. It is a Waller County bill. It is a Crockett County bill. It is a Brewster County bill. It is a Starr County bill. It is a Comal County bill. And why? Because all of those counties actually have over 100%. Interestingly enough, Loving County has 187%. So you see it a bit skewed in some of our smaller counties. And so what this bill actually does, Mr. Chairman, we have some things in place already where the registrar, where you mark an S for suspended. We're actually under 2, if you'll look on page 1, on November following a general election. This is after 25 months. The voter's name is not on the suspense list and the voter has not voted in any election during the previous 25 months. Then they can be removed from the voter rolls. And so, Mr. Chairman, it just requires the voter registrar to send a voter confirmation notice to all voters who, as of November 30th of an even number year, have not voted in the previous 25 months. A voter who does not respond is placed on the suspense list and then removed from the suspense list. And so with that, I will just say that, I met with some concerned citizens that said this is an issue. I mean, I don't know how we have more on the voter rolls than we actually have eligible to vote. And it's because people move. It's because people, sometimes we have some things in place for when people die or are deceased, but this will, I think, give them another tool, and it actually eventually will save the county's money because you don't keep mailing out all. I think we were calculating that it could save how many mailings, at least 3 or 4 mailings as it moves through the process. So really interesting bill. This bill is constitutional. It has ascended all the way up through the Supreme Court of the United States. Ohio had this bill, and it was litigated, and Supreme Court upholds the Ohio's reduction of voting rolls. And so with that, I'll take any questions.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Paxton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Senator.
Good morning, Senator Paxton.
So I have a question, situation just in my own family. So my mother lived with us in her final years. Her address was our home address. She passed away in 2014, and I think it took a couple of years before I still get mail from my mom, now, even all of these years later, 9 years later. But we no longer get a voter registration card for her. All of my children are grown. 2 of them still live in Texas and have changed addresses here. One of them is in the military. Her address of record is our home address, so I get her voter registration card at our home, or hers comes to our home. Our son graduated from college in 2015 and moved to another state. He hasn't lived at home since 2015. And every year, I still get at our home a voter registration card in McKinney, Texas, in Collin County. So would this address a situation like that?
Yes. Yeah, he would be removed from those voter rolls after 25 months. So it's 2 election cycles. You catch 2. You catch the presidential. You catch a gubernatorial. Mm-hmm. So those are 2 very high profile. Some people do not vote in the gubernatorial elections, right? But a lot of people, most people, vote in that presidential. You're going to catch them. The May uniform election counts, the constitutional election. So after those 25 months, and it's the November 30th following the second, election, it's mailed out to say, you haven't voted in 25 months. Are you still there? And if they do not respond, then they are removed from the voter.
So the lack of response indicates something, right?
That's right.
Yeah. And to be clear, my son is registered to vote in another state and has been, right? So we're talking about 8 years. He's voting somewhere else and still getting a voter registration card in Texas, right? So thank you. I appreciate that.
Right. And, this, again, it's interesting. A lot of different states, deal with how you do clean this up. But it's worthy to note that most of the counties listed in Texas are smaller counties, actually, and so I think this gives the registrar another tool to be able to clean up those voter rolls, which I will just say gives a lack of confidence. I mean, when people say, what do you mean we have more people registered than are eligible to vote? And I don't like that. And in dealing with some folks that came to me, we had several meetings about this. We looked at the Ohio law that, again, has made its way all the way through the Supreme Court of the United States and is constitutional. It gives another tool to clean this up.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Certainly, it's 2023. Right? It's 2023. There ought to be a way to keep things more current than that.
Right.
So, thank you. Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Lamontia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Colforce, when you say that there's more people on the voter rolls than are registered to vote, is that based on, I guess, census results?
It looks like what it is it probably is census. I'm looking at what Judicial Watch had done a deep study on. And so it looks like they used some of the census and also some of the reporting data from the counties.
Right. So in Cameron County, we have that issue, but a big part of that is because we've got a lot of rural area, but also where I live in the city of South Padre, we don't have door-to-door mail. So everyone has P.O. boxes who resides on South Padre Island. So in those cases, would this be detrimental, or would that have a higher impact in a location that doesn't have door-to-door mail and everyone has only P.O. boxes?
Yeah, so if you're registered because of Senate Bill 1111, you can't have a P.O. box. That was one of the bills that passed last session. So you cannot use a P.O. box as your permanent resident anymore.
Right, but it can still be your mailing address, correct?
I think so. If Senator Bittencourt was down here, he would say yes. I'm looking at Senate Bill 1111. A person may not establish a residence at any place other than the person is not inhabited, and a person may not designate a previous residence, a home fixed. So yes, the mailing box, the P.O. box can be used as your mailing address, but not as your residence.
Got it. Thank you.
As a clarification.
Thank you.
So, and the eligible voting population, CVAP, is kind of what that was based on. And it's interesting, it fluctuates in how that's done, because you're marked as S, suspended. Again, it's just one of those tools that says, gosh, this person hasn't voted, in 25 months. Let's mail to them and see if they're still there. Let's see if they're still at that residence. You could have graduated high school and moved to Houston, still have a Brenham address, but you're not voting there anymore. But they continue to keep mailing to that. So after that 25 months, they mail to that person. They don't respond. They're removed. If they respond, they're not. Hi, Senator Bittencourt. Building off of great Senate Bill 1111 from last session. When Senator Bittencourt first saw this bill, he thought that I was changing his bill. And I go, Senator, I was your first joint author. Right. I said, so no, I'm not. Actually, the drafting moved it down so that it's clearer, Senator Bittencourt.
Senator Bittencourt, do you have questions?
I was waiting for this chairman to recognize me instead of the other chairman. No, I gather I missed some of your layouts, and I just wanted to make sure to ask the question, but I think you've already answered it, that you're following the Ohio law, literally mirroring it exactly, I would assume. And I would have been happy to join author. So I guess I'll just co-author now.
What's that?
I've been happy to join author. I guess I'll just
I know. I think we filed it. Oh, that was filed really early when we were all still back at home. So
yes, well, I was too busy with property tax.
Senator Bittencourt, I was saying that this actually came out of several meetings in Fort Bend County. Right. And Harris County, we were talking about the eligible voters and voter rolls not matching up a percentage over. And actually, Harris County is not on the list right now. So, right. But Fort Bend County is.
All All right, well,
And
glad to
Waller
hear-
County in Senate District 8.
Right, glad to hear we're mirroring a constitutional statute at the Supreme Court. Thank you.
Will not have to be litigated.
Thanks. Any other questions for the author? Thank you, Senator. Thank you very much. We'll open testimony, and our invited witness on this bill is Ed Johnson on Senate Bill 260. Mr. Johnson, come on down. Introduce yourself, give us your testimony. Welcome.
My name is Ed Johnson. I'm testifying for myself, and I am for Senate Bill 260. This is a great bill, and yes, it does affect small counties. I actually spend a lot of time in a small county that's in the senator's district, so I have some knowledge on this, but actually it's a statewide issue. Talk more about my experiences in Harris County when director of elections there. We spent a great amount of time trying to clean up the voter roll, and I will tell you, when I left that office in 2018, about a third, we could only match about 2/3 of the Harris County voter roll, hard match them to DPS or Social Security or any other database. There was a third that we could not hard match. Out of that, there were 15% of that we couldn't find at all. They were records that we couldn't match to anything. So Texas overall has a very bloated voter registration system, and the problem is it's bad data in the system. Over the years, is about 2010 is when we started comparing to the DPS roll against the voter roll. Before then, there was actually no validation to what was typed into the voter roll was actually accurate. So you ended up with a lot of records that were Freddie Fatfingered, the wrong birth dates, misspelled names, and you can't match that data to other rolls to get them removed. So we have this bad data on there, and which actually gives Texas a very bad image. You look at our voting statistics. Other states across the way, are voting 60, 70% during presidential elections, and we're only voting 50%. Well, it's because we have all this bad data on our voter roll. This bill would help clean up that bad data from there. Can I continue on just a little bit?
You finished that thought, yes, sir.
Okay.
Bill's in good shape.
One of the things that this will actually do is actually help save states and counties money. The state, through Chapter 19 fund, pays 40 cents every 2 years for every voter on the roll. So by cleaning up the voter rolls, it's going to be less money that the state's going to have to pay out to the counties. But on the other end, by cleaning the voter roll, the county actually saves money. As previous testimony, a returned voter certificate costs 3 times the amount of any other mailing. So by not having to send out this voter registration certificate to a bad address and have it come back returned, the county saves money. In the process, when you mail voter certificates and it comes back returned, the immediate result is you have to mail a confirmation notice. So this bill just puts that first. You're mailing a confirmation notice, you're getting the voter roll cleaned up, and then you don't mail out bad certificates, which makes for a cleaner voter roll and a more, I guess, fair, economic, productive election. And gives Texas a better picture of we have a higher voter turnout in the thing.
Well, thanks for your testimony. Senator, is there any questions for Mr. Johnson?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll open public testimony, and the chair calls Andrew Eller, Dr. Susanna Carranza, Elizabeth Garretts, Mary Flood Nugent. Again, we're looking for Andrew Eller, Dr. Susanna Carranza, Elizabeth Garretts, Mary Flood Nugent, and Roxy Williamson. If I called your name, come on down and have a seat at the table. We're also looking for Valerie DeBill. Chair calls Valerie DeBill. Let's keep going. The chair calls Julie Gramillion, and Alice Yee. Alice Yee. And the chair calls Charles Cruz and Camilla Factory. All right. And Grace Pankel. The chair calls Grace Pankel. And if I called your name, please have a seat here. And if there are not enough seats, we'll accommodate you on the next panel. You guys make yourselves comfortable. Very good. We'll start over on my left, your right. So when you're ready, introduce yourself and we'll let you get situated there. I know you just got down. Introduce yourself and give us your testimony. And get close enough to the microphone so we can hear you. Welcome.
I've never been accused of being a low talker. My name's Elizabeth Garretts. I live in Harris County. I was in Senate District 17, redistricted into 15, but I was a Senate District Chair that encompassed part of 18, and I was just going to also say, Brenham, the Bluebonnets are amazing. We drove up this morning. So I would like to register my opposition to this bill. In addition to being an election judge, I'm also a voter registrar, volunteer deputy voter registrar. And I will say that I'm very opposed to the time limit, where after 26 months, if someone doesn't vote, they will be basically mailed something, which people do not check their mail. So I really worry that people are going to get kicked off the voter rolls just for the act of not voting. So say they skip a presidential year, they would not be able to vote in the next presidential election. And a lot of voters are infrequent voters, so I'm very concerned that this makes a very high bar that will interfere with our citizens' right to vote, which I think is extremely important, and I'm sure you agree with me. So thank you for giving me the opportunity, and really appreciate your time.
Thank you for testifying. Thanks for coming down. Welcome. Introduce yourself. Give us your testimony.
Thank you. Good morning, Senators. Good morning. I thank you very much for considering testimony on Senate Bill 260. My name is Mary Flood Nugent. I'm a 66-year-long Texan and have been a Harris County resident for a long time. I am a mother of 6 children, a retired registered nurse, but I am most importantly for this right now a proud election worker of many years, an alternate judge and a presiding judge for over 20 years. I have been well acquainted with Senator Betancourt through the years. As a matter of fact, I found my old voter registration certificates that have Senator Betancourt's name on them. In a funny kind of way, as a VDVR, I think I might have worked for Senator Betancourt. You could say that. There's so many stories that I could tell about how voters, solid, registered voters, feel when they get purged from the rolls. I have seen people that have lived in the same address for 73 years be purged from the voter rolls because she didn't vote in the last election, but she voted in the previous presidential election. An elderly cafeteria worker. One of the things that I've done as an election judge is that I opened the inaugural election at the historic Texas Medical Center. It will affect a lot of people who are working hard, who are first responders. Keeping up with voter registration and with being purged from polls should not be something that Americans need to do.
Thank you for your testimony. Welcome. Introduce yourself. Give us your testimony.
Okay, my name is Andrew Eller. I'm the State Republican Executive Committee man for Senate District 24. I'm here representing the Republican Party of Texas and myself. I have over 27 years experience as an election judge at both precinct and poll site levels, as well as central count. I also have experience as a volunteer deputy voter registrar and as a poll watcher. So I have a lot of experience in this background. I will say I have just two pieces on this. This is a great bill. We are for the bill. Over the years, I have been looking at the voter rolls in Bell County, and one of the things I've noticed, this is just not a Harris County issue or some of these other issues. We are seeing some of the same similar issues in Bell County. I will tell you, my own personal research has shown over almost 200 people living at P.O. boxes in Bell County, which is not proper, and especially with the last Senate bill that was passed, or the last legislatures. So that has been an issue. The other thing that I have found is almost as many suspended voters. We have about 20% suspended voters in Bell County. I found almost 20% who also were not necessarily suspended, but were no longer living at addresses, just using personal verifiable data. And that's quite a bit of information, or quite a bit of people that could not be living at a residence that they say they're still living at. Although the cards, and I think Senator Paxton said it quite well, that the cards are still being received, so they're not being returned, so the voters are not being suspended. Because they're not being suspended, they're still on the rolls, but they're no longer even in Bell County, and that's what I'm seeing. I'm seeing almost as much as we're seeing on our suspended voters. So I do support this bill and ask that you do vote it through. Thank you.
Thanks for your testimony. Senator, you want to ask now or when we get to the end of the panel?
That's fine.
If you can now, if you want to. That's fine. Okay, thank you. Dr. Carranza, introduce yourself. Welcome. Give us your testimony.
Hi, I'm Dr. Susanna Carranza. I'm testifying on my own behalf, and I oppose this bill. Like the first two testimonies, election judge, poll clerk, I register voters regularly, and there are several things that concern about this bill. Even though it's a short bill, I'm really concerned in many ways. One, as well pointed, the time limit, which essentially if you skip a midterm, you get fast track into a suspense and removal process. That is absolutely undemocratic. Nowhere in the word that says you have to vote in every election. You should vote in every election, but just because you skip some, you shouldn't be under increased scrutiny. So that to me is absolutely a showstopper. The other thing about the suspense list, as mentioned, is that you might not notice the mail, and if there's any issue with your address, any little mistake in your address, you mail my bounce. I, as a poll worker in Austin, have seen a lot of people marked as suspense because there was a minor difference in the mailing address and their home address, or they forgot to remove the mailing address or something. A lot of people that never moved, like in the last 5 years, but there was some old record for whatever reason that shows that may have been somewhere else, that they end up suspense, but they haven't moved. Like countless people that I encounter at the polls and when helping them update. The word suspense also makes people afraid, and they think, oh, I'm suspense, so I cannot vote. It requires a lot of education for people to know if you're in suspense, but you still live there, you can go and vote, or you can update your address. But people don't know that. You see suspense, it's almost automatically, people just don't even bother. And anyway, and any suspicion of change, that's item 3 on the bill, is also very broad. Thank you.
Thanks for your testimony. Welcome. Introduce yourself. Give us your testimony.
Good morning. I'm Roxy Hall Williamson from Galveston, Texas. I'm here to oppose this bill, and like my fellow Texans here at the table, I'm very active as a voter registrar. I work with the Early Ballot Board, as well as some other voter engagement activities in Galveston. And under these changes, eligible voters like myself who are either going through some type of medical treatment that caused them to move — I had emergency brain surgery last May, So I had to stay with my parents until I was released under the doctor. I've moved again. And in Galveston, the addresses are very funny. I live on N.5. I cannot count the number of times that FedEx or Amazon have misdelivered packages to my apartment looking for folks around my area. So this is very problematic in the sense that if you are unhoused, if you're going through any kind of conditions where you're living with family or you're having any other kind of life events happening, you could be purged from the rolls unfairly if you are having issues with voting. And with the laws currently on mail-in ballots, it's very difficult if you are not experiencing something severe that would give you an excuse to use a mail-in ballot. I'm just very concerned, especially looking around this room right now and knowing that vulnerable communities that look like me would be hit hardest with this bill as far as verifying information, ID, qualifications, and those kinds of things because of life events. And I would just really ask you to reconsider. We already have amazing things in place where these administrative issues can be handled if we were to not reinvent the wheel. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Senator Betancourt, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ladies, I want to make sure you understand what the change that she's making just does. It moves, after 25 months, you move to a suspense list. So to use the comment, if you're in an interim election between the presidential years, you're still on the rolls in the presidential election. Then you move the suspense list where you have 4 years. So this is really a 6-year suspense list. I just want to make sure everyone understands the timeline of this. But I have to go back to ask a specific question about Bell County. So you have 200, even after the passage of Senate Bill 1113, and after the fact that it's been adjudicated, and after the fact that it's been, at the appellate court level, and upheld, they still haven't done anything about 200 people at impossible addresses that everyone knows are impossible.
That's correct. When I did the analysis in early 2022 and then completed it basically mid-year, I did submit the list of names to our voter register, which I did have a quite good working relationship with. Now, we did have a turnover in our elections administrator in that office, so it is possible that some things got dropped there. But I did check again right before the last election, and those folks were still on the rolls. And that would have been the November 2022 election. So,
and was that did you make an official challenge then, or did?
No, I did not make an official challenge. I was trying to be, overtly nice and just say, okay, here's some things we need to look at. The question did come up to me, and it was the actual statement that was given to me was, well, we have to be careful about residencies. And I said, well, you can't live in a P.O. box. You can't live in a commercial box. And they said, well, we know that, but what if they're homeless and they live under the bridge by there? I said, well, that's fine, because they should be putting that down as their residence, and their mailing address is the commercial P.O. box.
Right. One of the reasons why that was won at the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals was because there is a homeless exemption, and it's very clearly delineated there. Now, I'll be sending a letter based on your testimony to Bell County. So thank you for bringing that to my attention, because, Mr. Chairman, that was a very important bill that was passed. Because the whole concept of people registering at impossible addresses, and when we give a homeless exemption and specify it, that's the way to keep a voter roll with integrity. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Members, any other questions for our witnesses? Thank you each for being here. Well, we generally ask the questions. Is there something that you want to include? I'm not sure if your mic is your mic.
Is on the suspension list.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, guys, for being here.
Thank you.
The chair now calls Valerie DeBill, Julie Gramillion, Alice Yee, Charles Cruz, Camilla Factory, Grace Pankel, Claudia Torres Yanez, Welcome to each of you, and we'll normally begin on my left, your right. So when you're ready, introduce yourself, give us your testimony.
Good to see you again, Chairman. And good morning. Thank you for having us. And my name is Alice E. I represent myself and my 93 years old father. This bill requires every year election, attending election or participating in election. For example, my father is not every year election voter, but he never pay attention to the mail pieces. In that case, he will be removed from a voter roll. This is not fair to Asian American, to people who doesn't speak English or speak English as second language, so they don't understand all these rules, these mail pieces. So somehow they were removed. And this is in 21st century. We want everybody vote. This is our citizens' privilege to vote. But in somehow our state always try to remove people to voting, remove them, doing everything you possible can to remove them from voting. I don't understand. My dad told me this morning, ask them why you afraid people to vote. This is really not fair. I feel like our lawmakers should be shamed. Texas voting turnout is the lowest in the whole nation. Why? You have to think about it. Today, I really urging, we voted for you. We vote, your position is voted by voter. You need working for the voters to try to help people to vote, have their voice to be heard. That's not hard to do. But why creating tons of bills to press the voter? Thank you.
Well, thank you for your testimony. Welcome. Introduce yourself and go ahead with your testimony.
Good morning. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak today. My name is Julie Grimion, and I am a resident of Harris County, representing myself, and I speak in opposition of this bill. I have served as an election judge, as a poll watcher in several elections, and in that work, you would be surprised how many people are confused by the registration process. I know it sounds simple. It seems really easy. The person sitting next to me in the back said, you can check online. What's the big deal? But it's surprisingly harder than it seems. It's 2023, Ms. Patton, I agree with you. And yet you can't register online. You have to print out a piece of paper. You have to mail it in. You have to hope it gets there. You have to hope that the person entering it in does the data entry correctly. There are so many flaws along that process. And if the notice to the voter was being sent via certified mail, signature required, so we had confirmation of delivery, I might not be as opposed, but it doesn't. And I think everyone in this room can testify that they have received a piece of mail for the wrong person at some point. So if the card is not required to be proved delivered, then we actually have no way of demonstrating that a legitimate voter received it in the first place or has an opportunity to respond to it. The second thing I'd like to add is that the conversation this morning seems to be mostly about convenience. It's easier, it's cheaper, it's better on the county registrars. Why do we have all these extra people? I understand that argument, but why not leave it to the counties to decide what's easier for them, what they would rather do? At least in Harris County, we can make that decision for our population. And so I urge you to vote in opposition of this bill.
Thank you for your testimony. Good morning. Welcome. Introduce yourself and go ahead.
Good morning. My name is Kimia Factory. I am the Central Texas Regional Organizer for Black Voters Matter Fund, and I am here to oppose this bill. Aside from this bill being alarming to marginalized communities who are subject to oppressive outcomes of gerrymandering and redistricting in this state continuously, this bill is privileged. Seeing as Texas is ranked number 4 in the country for the highest rate of homelessness, totaling at a population of 27,229 individuals. Despite the argument earlier that there is a homeless exemption within this bill, the assumption that an unhoused individual has the time or resources to understand such an exemption is privilege at its at its purest form. An individual who is overcoming being unhoused is also trying to overcome the oppressive barriers that voter registration provide in this state. This bill is also ableist. The access and the language in this bill disregards folks who have disabilities when it comes to ADHD, ADD, or even the ability to see. To assume that a voter resides in the same place, once again, is very privileged, seeing as we know that communities of color are often subject to have to move due to outcomes of poverty in this state. So everything about this bill is convenient for a certain audience, and it's also strategic in oppressing another audience, and that is the most marginalized community throughout the state. The Constitution talks about equality, and nothing about this bill is equal or reaches the lives of the people who deserve to have a voice on the ballot. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Good morning. Introduce yourself and give us your testimony.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen of the Senate. My name is Charles Cruz, CREWS, not like Ted. I am here to speak on my own behalf. I served as an election judge in Harris County. I live in Baytown, Texas. I've served for an entire election cycle, and I've seen very large turnout elections, and I've seen pathetically low turnout elections. This bill will do nothing to increase voter turnout and is expected to decrease voter turnout, which is the opposite of what we should be doing to improve democracy in the state of Texas. Most troubling is the last clause, which states, the registrar has any other reason to believe a voter's current residence is different from that listed on the registration records. This reeks of Jim Crow era laws, such as literacy tests, which were selectively enforced to disenfranchise certain personnel from voting. This is a horrific clause that clearly is intended to be used as a cudgel to further disenfranchise already disenfranchised communities. I am strongly opposed to this bill, and I encourage all of y'all to please vote against this bill. Thank you.
Well, thank you for your testimony. Welcome, introduce yourself, and go ahead with your testimony.
Hi, my name is Valerie DeVille. I am testifying on my own behalf, but my testimony is informed by my experience as Director of Voter Registration for several years for an organization. I've also worked in election protection. I've been an election judge. I've personally registered more than 2,500 Texans to vote. It is one thing that you may not realize if you're not a volunteer deputy registrar is that the voter registration form doesn't have a box for apartment number. And it's really hard to deliver somebody's mail if you don't have their apartment number. And a lot of people miss that because they're used to digital forms where there's a box for that. And the number of people who I've said, is there a unit number? And they go, oh yeah, there is. Means that I have caught a problem that would keep them from getting their mail at all. The other issue is every 25 months, there are lots of people who only vote in presidential elections. It's not ideal, but it's the fact. And if you're going to go by 25 months, I understand that Senator Betancourt said that, once you go on suspense, that's 4 years, but it's not always 4 years. It's 4 years or until the county tries to mail you something official and it gets returned to them as undeliverable, which indicates to them that you don't actually live where you said you live, and then they take you off the rolls. Also, looking yourself up online and having that box pop up that says you're in suspense, we get lots of calls at the hotline, and I get lots of voters asking me, what does that mean? Does that mean I can't vote? They don't know what that means. Suspense sounds like you've been suspended. And so they don't know how to process that. So there are a number of steps that happen in all of these processes that are very confusing to voters. And I don't know how many times I have to tell this committee this, but voting is a right, not a privilege. You need to stop putting obstacles in people's way. They have the right to do this. They don't have to prove that they're good enough or smart enough or fast enough or literate enough or white enough to vote.
Thanks for your testimony. Senators, any questions for any of our witnesses? Thanks for being here. The chair calls Grace Pankel, Claudia Torres-Yanez, Melinda Roberts, Jeff Clay. Again, we're looking for Grace Pankel, Claudia Torres-Yanez, Melinda Roberts, Jeff Clay. Welcome. Just take a seat wherever you're comfortable. And when you're ready, introduce yourself and give us your testimony.
I'm Melinda Roberts. I'm with Bexar County Election Integrity, and I'm here representing them. I think we all agree that the integrity of our elections starts and stops with voter rolls. When the voter rolls are inflated, our elections are off. I am in total support of this bill. I do want to share that in the primaries, we got multiple calls from people who received mail-in ballots, applications and ballots from loved ones who had been dead for 15 and 20 years. So they're still on the rolls. We would like to make a suggestion between 1 and 2 that the word or, O-R, go between 1 and 2. And number 3, we would like some additional language that allows somebody like us that can challenge someone on the voter roll that has passed or moved. Another example is my own son moved years ago, has not lived in the state, filed for a change of address, and still receives his voter registration in the mail. I've worked in election polls, I've registered voters for a number of years, and I've been a poll watcher, and our rolls are one of our number one problems. So we support SB 260. Thank you.
Thanks for your testimony. Welcome, introduce yourself, and give us your testimony.
Thank you. My name is Jeff Clay, and I've been sitting here listening to some of the testimony, and I'd like to state I was in the military for 20 years, moved several times, and every time I moved, I had to change my address on all my credit cards, utilities, banks, everything, and I was able to do that. And everybody else in this country has to do the same thing. When they move, they have to change their address for everything they have. I don't see these people complaining that changing your address for a credit card is too hard, or changing your address for your bank is too hard so you can get your money. We're not giving our citizens enough credit for being smart and able to do simple tasks. Registering to vote is not hard, and changing your address is not hard. So I just want to say that voting is not a instance that's different from everything else we do in life. It's part of our right. We have a right to vote, but you still have some responsibility to make sure that you keep your address correct so nobody else votes for you and steals your vote. So I just want to say that I'm glad I'm not a member of some of the groups that they say are not able to go change their address because they're as smart as I am. I'm not the smartest person in the room. All these other groups are able to do the same things. So we shouldn't limit the credit we give them on their ability to at least keep their address current. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Senators, any questions for either witness? Thank you both for being here. And that is all the witnesses who have registered to testify on, for, or against Senate Bill 260. Anyone else wishing to testify on, for, or against Senate Bill 260? Seeing and hearing none, public testimony is closed. Bills left pending at this time. The chair now lays out Senate Bill 946, and recognizes its author, Senator Sparks, to explain the measure. Good morning, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. I come before you today to lay out Senate Bill 936, which simply requires that elections pertaining to bonds, other debt, or tax increases be held on the November uniform election date. This bill addresses two critical problems in Texas: the dismal voter turnout for off-cycle elections, and our growing debt-to-GDP ratio that will crush our ability to continue to be a competitive state if something's not done. Sadly, there are plenty of examples of dismal turnout. Some recent local elections held in May have passed significant debt with less than 2% of total voters in favor. Members, this is not democratic. It's a matter of sound public policy. I think we can all agree that bond propositions are best decided when the most number of voters engage in the decision-making process. Research exists that suggests that the lowering of voter turnout that accompanies off-cycle election timing empowers the largest and best organized interest groups to have increased influence on the election outcomes. As you may notice, this probably isn't the first time you've seen this bill. My staff did a little research and found that a very similar bill was filed in the House in 2013 by our very own Senator Springer. Back then, our outstanding local debt was a whopping $199 billion. By the time Senator Betancourt carried this bill in 2019, that number had increased to $240 billion. In its latest report, the Texas Bond Review Board showed that our current outstanding local debt is about $284 billion. Texas ranks third in local debt per capita among the 10 most populous states in the country, right behind New York and California. Although we like to think that Texas is number one, this is one of those rankings I think we would all prefer to be towards the lower end. So our current local debt per capita is approximately $9,000. That's $9,000 per man, woman, and child for local debt in the state of Texas. You might say, well, Texas is growing. We've got to have things built in order to keep up with that. I would agree with that. But the two top local debt per capita is New York and California, neither of which are growing. Those states are shrinking in population. Tell me how they're going to pay that debt off as their population shrinks. Proverbs has a lot of practical counsel for everyday decision making. And Proverbs 13:22 says, "A good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children." That's what I'm in favor of, leaving a fiscally sound Texas to my children, my grandchildren, my great-grandchildren. Members, this bill will help us address our debt problem, and it'll help us address low voter turnout during off-election cycles. It's a pro-democratic, good governance bill. This bill helps the people make informed decisions when it comes to their communities. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Senator. Committee members, any questions for the author? Thanks. We'll call your invited witness.
Thank you.
We'll open testimony and call James Quintero. And for the benefit of those who are here to testify, it's our intent to hear Mr. Quintero's testimony, and then the committee will stand in recess because we do have to give the Senate Services personnel time to move these tables so that the Senate can come in at 11. So after Mr. Quintero's testimony, we'll leave this bill pending and come back. When we return, we'll have public testimony on this bill and move on through the agenda. Mr. Quintero, welcome. Introduce yourself. Give us your testimony.
Mr. Chairman, members, good morning. My name is James Quintero. I represent the Texas Public Policy Foundation. Thank you for taking up this issue today. I'm here to testify in support of Senate Bill 946. As a matter of sound policy, tax ratification elections and bond elections are best decided at times when the greatest number of voters participate in the decision-making process. In other words, big decisions merit maximum input. And yet the situation today allows for very much the opposite. Consider this. In May 2022, cities, counties, school districts, and special districts proposed $34 billion in new debt. And that's according to the good folks over at the Texan. In November of that same year, when turnout was much higher, local governments submitted bond propositions totaling just $21 billion. Now, what that signals to me is that local governments are placing a great deal of weight on the May election cycle when voter turnout is lower. And that's a fairly troubling bit of information that signals the need for change. And make no mistake, this type of good government change is popular. Last session, the Texas Public Policy Foundation worked with WPA Intelligence to ask 800 Texans the following question: do you support or oppose requiring local bond issues to be on the November general election ballot to ensure as many voters as possible participate? The results were overwhelmingly in favor of change. A total of 80% of respondents signaled support for the change, whereas just 9% registered their opposition. 11% said they didn't know. And so I think given this level of overwhelming support and the policy rationale that undergirds change, I would kindly ask this committee to look favorably on SB 946 so that we can ensure that the greatest number of voters are making our most important decisions. And with that, I thank you for your time.
Thank you for your testimony. Senators, any questions for the author? Senator Sparks, do you have any questions? Very good. Thank you for being here. Thanks for your testimony. And it is getting close to the time that it will take to reset the tables, and so the Senate committee, we're going to leave this bill pending and have take testimony when we come back. We will likely return 30 minutes upon adjournment. Senator Safraini. Oh, thank you. Very good. Thank you. We got him. And so we'll stand in a recess until 30 minutes upon adjournment or recess of the Senate today. Thank you. Thank you.